Yeah, well, I was born and raised in San Francisco, and we moved to Pacific Avenue in, I don't know, I was in the 7th grade. We moved right next door to my future wife, Elizabeth. So Betty and I were married in 1941, April of 41. And about that time, when Pearl Harbor came along, on this Sunday, December the 7th, and in the middle of the bridge, we heard Pearl Harbor had been hit. So we went on to our picnic. We had a nice little green spot by a creek, but it kind of took the stuffings out of it with the Pearl Harbor announcement. So then, with our country in real problems, they set up the draft board. And the draft board was getting pretty hot in our tail. And I did not want to walk in this particular service, so I went over to Alameda and tried to get into the Navy Air Corps. And everything went fine until the very end, when I was having my teeth inspected and a big shot Navy guy came in. I don't have a perfect bite, so he said, put on your clothes, and that was the end of that. I decided to try the Army Air Force. And so down on 4th Street in San Francisco, and did all the testing and everything. I had the 2.5 years of college, which was counted okay. And the Army didn't care about my teeth being crooked, so they took me. And the day I received my information, the next day I got my notice from the draft board to appear, so I just made it. And then in 42, early 1942, I got my notice to go to Shepherd Field in Wichita Falls, Texas, which is the end of the world. And that was closest I ever came to deserting. But we were there about a month, maybe 2. And we were already married, so Betty came down to see me in Texas. And the day that she got there was the day we shipped out. And they wouldn't tell her where I'd gone. I think that's about the way it goes. So anyhow, went through all the classification and everything, and went for my primary to Chickasha, Oklahoma. Flew the PT-19s, Fairchild. And Betty was with me there. She and some other gals of the cadets were renting an apartment together. And from there we went to Garden City, Kansas for basic in the old Volt-E vibrator. And that was kind of rough because we had coal stoves. There was soot all over the place, and there was snow and ice. We had to sweep off the wings of the planes every morning. And that's when Betty worked for very little, something like, I don't know, 2.5 a week at a dime store. And went to Victoria, Texas for advanced. And that was Victoria, Texas. And when we were there, Betty had a pretty nice thing because there was the people she stayed with, and rent was pretty cheap. They had a maid, and that maid called Betty, Miss Betty, and she brought her breakfast to her. But advanced was good. That was the AT-6, and we got 10 hours in the P40 when we were in Victoria, so that was good. And from there we went, I think that's where we got our wings. That was class of 44D. And then we had a little time off and went home. And we spent some time in San Francisco and really enjoyed that, being a second lieutenant. And then we went back and headed for Abilene, Texas for P47 training. And that was good. That was the place where it was hard to get a place to live for Betty and me. So Abilene, Texas was good. The old P47 was a great airplane. We were kind of scared of it at first. And then from there, went overseas to Italy. Went on a real slow convoy, 30 days across the Atlantic, and just barely keeping steerage. And we landed at Oran, Africa. And we met some South African pilots there and had some fun with them. They took us for a ride. And then from there we took an English ship over to Naples, Italy. And that was our first sight of anything like a war. There were sunken ships half sticking out of the water and everything. So we spent a couple of days around Naples there, and it was freezing cold. And finally we got taken up to where we were supposed to get into our outfit, the 79th Fighter Group, the 87th Squadron, in Jesi, Italy. And that's right near Ancona. And it's a funny thing. Jesi is J-E-S-I, and there's no J in the Italian alphabet. So I don't know how they figured that out. But I remember getting into Jesi when I first got there. It was mud up to your knees, and it was just horrible. Mud in the tents. We had squad tents. And we had stoves, which were 55-gallon drums with 100-octane gas outside coming in through a little tube, dripping into the stove on some sand. But it warmed up the place. And then it was combat all the way. There were 6 of us who went over there together. And the 2 first guys that went on a mission, they came back and said, nothing to it, piece of cake, just like back in the States. Well, my first mission, I remember it. What's the matter with me? The flight leader got shot down while I circled around, picked up the rest of the planes and got on somebody's wing. And we went on through, and it was a pretty good mission. We got shot at quite a bit. So when we got back to the base, we told them they were full of it. We're thinking it was a cakewalk. And I remember several of the missions. One mission I remember was really, I got the DFC for it. They had a K-25 camera, and you go down and do your shooting and bombing. And then when you came out, the guy with the K-25 had to go to the end of the line and go down again and take pictures. And I had a wingman going down with me. And I was strafing this gun emplacement and everything. And all of a sudden, here come these tracers right over my wings. My wingman was strafing right over me, and I just figured that was it. So I had to keep going lower and lower, and finally I screamed and pulled out, and I had nice holes in my wings. But the pictures came out so clear you could see the guys with the gun's eyeballs. So that was figured a pretty good set of pictures for the K-25. So that's how we got the DFC on that one. And then another one I remember up in northern Italy, right below Lake Como up there. And 88's bracketed me. They're popping on all 4 corners. And that's a scary thing, because when they got you bracketed, you better got. So I did funny things with that P47. Skidded, slipped, hit the water injection, did everything I could to get out of there, and I got out somehow. I don't know how. The Lord was with me. And the Fighter Squadron run was kind of a fun one. That's the one where I think 12 of us started out. By the time we got past Venice, 6 of them had gone back. I think there were 6 of us. And we went up over northern Italy, and there was a heavy cloud layer over the Alps, so we had to go up through the clouds and get above the cloud layer, which we did. And then one of the guys hollered, "Hey, there's a hole." So we went down through the hole and came out underneath, and we saw a great big bunch of trains, a marshalling yard, and we went down. And one of the guys on the way down, he said, "Oh, there's a cable, AC Matthias." He said, "There's a cable going from that little house up on the hill right down to the valley." And it turned out later that was the Hitler's Eagle's Nest,
we went down and shot up most of the trains in the valley. And it was weird because they were shooting at us from the tops of the hills and we were down below the guns. So we got out of there and came on back. When we were interrogated for that, the intelligence officer didn't know really where we had been. He kept asking questions. Then Matthias said about this little house on top of the hill with the cable. And he asked for some other questions and finally figured out we were at Fighter Squadron. Well, it wasn't long before there was all kinds of brass up at our field because I guess the underground was ready to go in there and pick off Hitler, who was there, and he was underground, under the mountain. So we kind of messed that up a bit. But anyhow, we got a lot of notoriety out of it. Big headlines in all 4 San Francisco papers. San Francisco pilot bombs Hitler's hideout. And I don't know, just a lot of missions. We went from Yacy to Fano and then to Cesenatico when the war was still on. And the war ended while we were in Cesenatico. And also while we were there, some guy went screaming down the hall one night, Roosevelt's dead, Roosevelt's dead. And it was true, he had died. When we go on a mission, they had these Englishmen up in the hills or in some place where they could direct us. We all had grid maps. And he'd direct us to the target. And it would be something like you see that little house down there and there's a couple of trucks and stuff. And then there's a row of trees or a river or something. Well, there's a whole bunch of Germans there and our guys can't get across. So we go down, probably within maybe 100 yards of our own troops. We'd shoot up the Germans and then we could see our guys get up and pass them. And that was kind of interesting to be able to help them out. And we had a good record of never having hit anybody up our own side. And that was good. And then there had a thing like a flak car. We get up over into Austria, and it's here between Klagenfurt and Villach was a pretty good train run. And we try to pick them off. We pretty well had their schedule down. And then one time I remember we came up over a hump and down into a valley and shot up this train. Then we went around again and came out. And this time, a flat car where the roof peels off and the sides go down, and there's an 88 looking at you right in the eyeball. So it was kind of hard getting out of the side of that thing. And I don't know too much more. It was an interesting time. Went up to Linz, Austria, Hersching Air Base, and we were there for occupation. And it was mostly just flying around and having a good time. So everybody brought their planes there for when the war was over, so we could just go pick any old P47 you want, fly around and have a good time. But that airplane was pretty neat. Ended up with 51 missions and got home safe, and I was real glad to get home. I think if I'd have stayed in another 6 months, I could have gotten captain, but I wasn't interested in that at all. Just get out. Came home to my beautiful wife. And 6 of us went over together, and 3 of us got back.